Edward Ted Bundy was not a monster in obvious disguise. He was a smiling, charming college student, someone you'd happily open your door to. That very quality made him blonde, blue-eyed, polite, a predator who could wrap lies around your heart and vanish into the night. In the early 1970s, the Pacific Northwest became the silent stage of his chilling pattern. Young, attractive women disappeared one by one, shopping, studying, scrolling through campus grounds, never to return. The police had almost nothing, no forced entry, no struggle, no witnesses. What they did have was a haunting detail etched in every case. The last sighting of each victim was with a man who appeared injured, begging for help, playing the role of hero. He called himself Ted Bundy, but that too was part of the fawade. He spent his days studying law, working odd jobs, and volunteering for political campaigns. Behind his clean-cut exterior, an evil plan brewed. He knew how to charm, to disarm, to steal trust. If you looked through photos of him at university, you'd see him at moral assemblies, in folklore. He's often pictured with a cast or crutch as his most insidious accessory. Approaching, crutch in hand, he'd ask for exercise help. "Can you give me a hand, please?" Most women didn't suspect. They helped once they were vulnerable, bundled into his car. And far from safety, his true self surfaced. Brutality replaced warmth. Every crime was plotted with terrifying clarity. A clean, swift abduction, then execution. His hunting grounds expanded, starting in Washington State, then Oregon, stretching across Idaho and Utah. Bundy took emotional pleasure from the method to kill, vanish, and repeat somewhere else, leaving police chasing shadows across state lines. Soon, he became known as the campus killer. In January 1975, undercover officers in Utah finally caught him. He was a suspect in an abduction from car scenario, but he talked his way out of a kidnapping charge. It should have been the end yet. The real story was just beginning. That arrest led to a sad irony. His release would cost more lives. Bundy was free to cross state lines again, shifting his violence to Colorado and ultimately to Florida, where he would orchestrate some of the most infamous attacks in American history. Every crime scene was like a grim mosaic of staged deception. Bundy wore disguises, sunglasses, wigs, sometimes using his innocence as a weapon. His victims were never random strangers. They were often college students, the kind of people who study hard, dream big, and trust easily. The cruelty of his violence was most horrifying because it came from a face people wanted to believe. Behind the headlines, investigators struggled. The crimes were spread out, linked only by cold descriptions and a string of similar histories. Bundy switched rental cars to avoid pattern detection. Investigators called him the campus killer, a fitting name for a predator who blended into sorority events and classroom corridors. Their only hope was to spot patterns among timing, method, and geography, tiny threads bundling up to form a terrible tapestry. But Bundy was better at changing shapes than the authorities were at unraveling patterns. His intelligence a gleaming Ivy League veneer made him elusive. He studied court proceedings, jury psychology, even interrogation tactics. Every arrest attempt revealed how deeply he understood the system. When he finally did face trial, he represented himself, dazzling the courtroom with speech and smirk. He faked comforting wounded victims. He befriended families of the dead. He denied accusations with polished resolve that no one saw the escalation coming. When Bundy escaped custody not once, but twice, he revealed not a wild lion desperate for freedom, but a calculating monster who methodically moved toward bigger, bolder crimes. His last trail of terror led him to Florida's Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee in early 1978. He creaked open the basement door of a student party, and the world inside changed forever. 2 students died, 2 others severely injured. Weeks later, he walked into a school and abducted a 12-year-old girl, Kimberly Leach's youngest victim. That crime finally triggered the national manhunt that would end his reign of terror. Ted Bundy's first arrest should have ended everything, but instead, it only marked a horrifying turning point in a story that still sends chills. through true crime history in 1975, when Bundy was finally linked to multiple attempted kidnappings. Investigators thought they had stopped a violent predator, but behind bars, Bundy remained in control. Even in custody, he had a way of manipulating people, charming guards, studying his own legal case, and buying time. He refused to confess, never hinted at guilt, and then he did something that shocked the world. He escaped. It was June 1977. Bundy had been held in a Colorado jail, but during a court visit, he asked to access the law library to work on his defense. They granted it, and Bundy, ever the planner, took advantage. Alone in the library, he jumped from a second-story window and vanished. For 6 days, he lived in the woods, survived on scraps, and hitchhiked, but he was recaptured. The public breathed a sigh of relief. He was locked up again. What no one expected was that Bundy had another plan, more daring and dangerous than the first. By December 1977, he had starved himself down enough to fit through a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell. While guards thought he was asleep under blankets, Ted Bundy had already crawled through the ceiling, broken into an apartment above, changed clothes, and vanished into the cold Colorado night. This time, he was gone for good. He had money, stolen identification, and a plan. He was heading south to Florida. Bundy arrived in Tallahassee in early January 1978, blending into a student-heavy neighborhood using the alias Chris Hagen. No one knew who he was. He enrolled at a local university gym, wandered freely, and soon, the predator in him reawakened. On January 15th, just weeks after arriving, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in the dead of night. Armed with a log, Bundy crept through the house like a phantom. In less than 15 minutes, he brutally attacked for women, to died, to survived but were left permanently scarred. Physically and emotionally, the attack was vicious. There was no time for anyone to react. Bundy then left the house and attacked another student just a few blocks away. Again, she survived. Barely. These weren't calculated, quiet killings. This was rage. This was chaos. This was a man out of control, no longer hiding behind charm or deception. But Bundy wasn't finished. On February 9th, just 3 weeks later, he abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school in Lake City, Florida. He lured her from class and murdered her in cold blood. This would be his final crime. Days later, on February 15th, Bundy was pulled over by police in Pensacola, Florida. His car was stolen. He tried to flee but was caught. Fingerprints confirmed what the officer couldn't believe at first. They had just arrested Ted Bundy. Now the law caught up. The trial that followed was a national sensation. For the first time, America watched a serial killer defend himself in court, smiling, cracking jokes, cross-examining witnesses, even flirting with the judge. Cameras rolled as he denied everything, despite overwhelming evidence. Bite marks on victims, eyewitnesses, and stolen items found in his possession. Bundy treated the courtroom like a stage, never showing remorse, only performance. He proposed to his girlfriend during the trial, in court, and she accepted. The jury, however, saw the truth. He was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. Later, he would be convicted for the murder of Kimberly Leach as well. 3 death sentences hung over his head. But even after conviction, Ted Bundy wasn't finished playing games. For nearly a decade on death row, he gave interviews, shared stories, and slowly began confessing. It was clear he had murdered far more women than anyone knew. His official count is 30, but many believe it was much higher. Finally, on January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside, hundreds gathered, not to mourn, but to celebrate. They cheered. They lit fireworks. They held signs that said "Burn Bundy, burn." It was one of the few times the country agreed. Justice had been done, but Bundy's story didn't fade. Books, documentaries, films, they continued to explore the terrifying complexity of a man who had a monster behind a smile. He wasn't the monster under the bed. He was the monster you'd invite inside. And that's why, decades later, The name Ted Bundy still chills the blood.